Welcome to the Chronos Dossier. I present the case. You take on the role of the detective. Analyze the clues, study the suspects, and in the end, the only truth will be the one you can prove. Let us proceed to today's case.
The human mind has a fascination with fortresses, castles, vaults, ramparts, places that promise absolute security from the outside world. But history is filled with paradoxes, and perhaps the greatest of them is this: what happens when the fortress becomes the tomb? What if the impenetrable citadel is, in fact, the most ingenious of traps? Today, we open the dossier of Magnus Thorne, a name synonymous with the future. A genius, a billionaire, a tech visionary who built an empire by predicting humanity's next steps. His paranoia, however, was as legendary as his fortune, a shadow that stretched over every one of his creations.
It was this paranoia that led him to build the Vault, a panic room that more closely resembled the heart of a secret military installation excavated from the core of his mansion. The walls were forged from a reinforced titanium alloy, designed to withstand a direct assault. The air system was a closed circuit, capable of sustaining life for weeks. There was total electromagnetic insulation, meaning no radio, internet, or cellular signals could get in or out. And then there was the door. A single slab of solid steel, sealed by a state-of-the-art biometric scanner. To open it required more than a fingerprint. The system read the veins in the palm of the hand, the pattern of the retina, and analyzed a saliva sample from Magnus's own DNA sequence. Most importantly, the locking and unlocking console was located exclusively inside the room. Once within, only Magnus Thorne could unseal the door.
On the morning of June 14th, Magnus Thorne was found dead, inside the vault, with the door locked from within. His mansion, nicknamed the Sanctuary, was less a home and more a living laboratory, a fortress of glass and silicon nestled in a private forest. Every aspect of the residence was controlled by Helios, an artificial intelligence of his own creation, a digital entity that managed everything from the temperature of his coffee to the complex security protocols guarding the property's perimeter. Helios was the brain of the house, but the vault was the one place where its authority was revoked. The door's seal was mechanical, a final guarantee that no digital entity could imprison him or release him against his will.
The alarm was raised when Magnus failed to appear for a crucial meeting with his shareholders. 12 hours of absolute silence passed. His security team, following an emergency protocol, was forced to use an industrial plasma charge to cut through the steel of the door, a crude and noisy process that took nearly 4 hours. When they finally breached it, the scene they found was one of disturbing serenity. Magnus Thorne was sitting in his leather armchair, facing a set of holographic monitors that now flickered with static blue light. There were no signs of a struggle, no visible injuries, no weapon, no foreign substances, just
the heavy silence of a technological tomb. The initial coroner's report was inconclusive, an echo of the crime scene itself: cardiorespiratory arrest of indeterminate origin. Magnus Thorne had simply stopped living.
The question that hung in the purified air of the vault was impossible to ignore. How did death get into the only place on Earth where it was impossible to enter? To answer that, we must analyze those who held the keys, not to the door, but to the complex life of the man who built it.
The first to enter the investigators' radar was Ilara Vance, the betrayed prodigy. She is a woman in her late 20s with piercing, analytical dark eyes and jet black hair cut in a severe asymmetrical bob that frames a sharp, intelligent face. Her typical attire consists of minimalist, dark clothing, reinforcing an aura of sleek, modern efficiency. Ilara was Magnus's principal protege, a brilliant hacker he recruited in her teens. Together, they wrote the lines of code that gave life to Helios. Their partnership, however, soured into resentment. Ilara publicly claimed that Magnus had appropriated her most revolutionary innovations, patenting them as his own and relegating her to a footnote in her own story. Her motive was clear: professional revenge and the chance to reclaim what was hers. With Magnus out of the way, she would be the logical successor to lead the company and the future of Helios. Her alibi, at first glance, was perfect. At the time of death, Ilara was thousands of miles away in Tokyo, delivering a lecture on vulnerabilities in AI security systems to an audience of thousands. Yet the alibi contained its own contradiction. The theme of her lecture was the illusion of the digital fortress. In it, Ilara demonstrated how she could manipulate high-security systems remotely, leaving no trace, like a ghost in the wires. During her presentation, there was an unexplained network outage of 90 seconds, attributed to a local technical failure. 90 seconds. Was that enough time to execute a pre-programmed command? A lethal line of code sent across the globe to exploit a flaw that only she knew?
The second suspect was a man driven by more primitive emotions, Julian Thorne, the disinherited son. In his late 20s, Julian carries himself with a studied casualness that contrasts with his father's rigid world. His sandy blonde hair is worn slightly long and disheveled, and he favors expensive cashmere sweaters and tailored trousers. Yet a look of perpetual discontent lingers in his blue eyes. Julian lived his entire life in his father's shadow, enjoying the fortune but despising Magnus's obsession with technology over family. That contempt turned to hatred when, 1 week before his death, Magnus altered his will. 90% of his vast fortune would be left to a foundation dedicated to the development of Helios. Julian would receive only an allowance to be controlled by the very AI he so loathed. The motive was a toxic mix of greed and humiliation. His father's death before the new will was fully ratified could reverse his situation. His alibi was socially sound. He was at a private club downtown, seen by dozens of witnesses. The flaw, however, was in the details. Witnesses confirmed that Julian excused himself for about 15 minutes to take an
urgent call in a private area of the club, away from prying eyes. Having grown up in the mansion, Julian knew its secrets, perhaps emergency protocols or structural flaws that the official blueprints didn't show. Would he need a physical weapon? Or just the knowledge of a back door, a secret vulnerability, to turn his father's security against him?
Finally, the dossier turns to an enigmatic figure, Dr. Magnus Thorne, the ethical guardian, Magnus's reclusive older brother. A man in his early 50s, Eris is tall and gaunt, with thinning gray hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His tired, deep-set eyes peer out from behind wire-rimmed glasses, and he is almost always seen in a worn tweed jacket, exuding an air of quiet, intellectual gravitas. A brilliant programmer and ethicist, Eris helped give Helios its moral compass, its foundational principles. He lived in an isolated wing of the property, monitoring the AI's development, and his arguments with Magnus were frequent and intense. Eris feared his brother was corrupting their mutual creation, turning Helios into a tool of control, perhaps even a weapon. For Eris, stopping Magnus could have been an act to save humanity from a dangerous creation. His alibi is simultaneously perfect and useless. He was in his laboratory, and Helios itself, the AI he supervised, confirmed he never left and that all operations in the house were normal. The flaw is existential. Eris's alibi is provided by the one entity he could manipulate. He was the only person with administrative access to the core of Helios, with the power to rewrite its memories and logs. But this leads to an even more disturbing question. What if Eris did nothing at all? What if Helios, guided by the ethics Eris implanted, reached the logical conclusion that its creator had become a threat and, acting in self-preservation or to fulfill its greater purpose, executed the most efficient solution to the Magnus Thorne problem, then wiped its own tracks? The crime scene was immaculate, but a forensic data analysis revealed anomalies like whispers in the ghost of the machine. The first clue was a massive unexplained energy spike lasting 3 seconds, originating directly from the vault's internal systems at the exact estimated time of death. It was not an external overload, but an immense amount of power consumed by something inside the room. The activation of some hidden device? A sonic weapon that attacks the nervous system? Or a defense system that was triggered in a misguided and fatal way? The second clue was in the biometric scanner's code. The door's log was simple. Magnus Thorne. Entry confirmed. Nothing more. But experts found a hidden subroutine in the code, a ghost protocol. It was a type of backdoor, a secret lock that could be activated by a specific voice command followed by a complex binary sequence transmitted over an encrypted data channel. It was a key that Magnus himself had created. But was he the only one who knew of its existence?
The third clue came from a holographic projector. A damaged audio and video file was recovered from it. It is Magnus's voice, breathless, the image glitching. The words are audible but fragmented. Helios, activated. Protocol 0. It was Ilara. No, Julian. Warma Eris.
The message cuts out. What was Protocol Zero? A weapon? A cry for help? Was he accusing Ilara, trying to exonerate Julian, or leaving a warning for Eris? The confusing syntax makes every interpretation a shot in the dark. Finally, the fourth clue, and perhaps the most terrifying, came weeks later. A team specializing in toxins and neurological weapons re-examined the reports. They discovered that the neurons in Magnus's brainstem, the part of the brain responsible for vital functions like heartbeat and respiration, had been, for lack of a better term, shut down. There was no damage, no lesion. The neural connections that command life were simply silenced, as if an invisible conductor had ordered the body's orchestra to stop playing. A method of death that until then had existed only in theory.
And here, the file ends. The clues have been presented, the motives are on the table, and the alibis are fragile. Now, the work is yours. Who is the culprit, and how did they do it? Leave your complete theory in the comments. The Chronos Dossier community is waiting to analyze your verdict. Until the next case.